When justice seems out of reach, sometimes help comes from the most unexpected places. The courthouse in Millfield was an imposing structure of granite and marble, its weathered steps having witnessed decades of legal proceedings. Today, those same steps felt impossibly steep to 8-year-old Lily Morgan as she climbed them, her small hand clutched tightly in her grandmother's weathered one. The other hand held firmly to the harness of Max, her loyal service dog, a German shepherd with intelligent eyes and unwavering devotion. "It's going to be okay, sweetie," Grandma Helen whispered, though the tremble in her voice betrayed her own uncertainty. Lily didn't respond. She hadn't spoken much since the accident 6 months ago, the one that took her parents and left her with nightmares that made her bolt upright in bed, screaming without making a sound. The accident that led to today's custody hearing, where her future hung in the balance. Inside, the courtroom buzzed with subdued conversation. Men and women in suits shuffled papers, whispered to each other, and occasionally glanced at the small girl with the large dog who sat perfectly still beside her. In the front row sat Uncle Thomas, her father's brother, a successful businessman who had flown in from Chicago with his wife. They'd only visited twice before the accident, but now they wanted Lily to move across the country to live with them. It would be best for her to have a fresh start, Lily had overheard Uncle Thomas telling the social worker. Helen is too old to raise a child, especially one with special needs. Those words had stung. Lily didn't want to leave the only home she'd ever known, her school, her few friends, and most of all, her grandmother. And she couldn't bear the thought of being separated from Max, who had been specially trained to help with her PTSD and selective mutism after the accident. Uncle Thomas's wife was allergic to dogs. As Judge Eleanor Winters entered the courtroom, everyone rose. With 30 years on the bench, the Honorable Judge Winters had seen it all, or so she thought. Her silver-streaked hair was pulled back into a tight bun, and her eyes, though kind, were sharp with intelligence and experience. "Today we are here to determine custody of Lily Morgan," the judge announced after everyone was seated. "I understand there are 2 parties seeking guardianship." The proceedings began with lawyers presenting arguments. Lily sat quietly, stroking Max's fur, her eyes darting between her grandmother, her uncle, and the imposing judge. The adults' voices washed over her in waves, discussing her future as if she weren't there. Little did anyone in that courtroom know that this ordinary custody hearing was about to take an extraordinary turn, one that would leave everyone, especially Judge Winters, in complete shock. Helen Morgan was 67, with arthritis that made her joints ache on rainy days and a modest pension from 40 years of teaching elementary school. What she lacked in physical strength, she made up for with a fierce love for her granddaughter. After losing her only son and daughter-in-law, Lily was all she had left. Mrs. Morgan, Thomas's lawyer, Mr. Peterson, addressed her on the stand. "While your devotion to your granddaughter is admirable, do you believe you can provide the long-term care and stability that Lily needs, given your age and health concerns?" Helen sat straight, her dignity intact despite the implied inadequacy. "I've been Lily's primary caregiver since birth. Her parents worked long hours, and I was the one who picked her up from school, helped with homework, and tucked her in many nights. After the accident, I learned everything I could about helping children with trauma. I may not be young, but I'm healthy, and my home is filled with love and memories of her parents." Mr. Peterson nodded sympathetically, but his next words were cutting. "And how do you plan to support Lily financially?" "My clients can provide private schooling, extracurricular activities, college savings, advantages you simply cannot match on a teacher's pension." From her seat, Lily watched her grandmother's face fall slightly. It was true, Uncle Thomas had money that Grandma Helen didn't. He lived in a big house with a swimming pool. But swimming pools didn't matter to Lily. What mattered was staying with the person who knew that she liked her sandwiches cut into triangles, not squares, who understood that she needed her special blanket when the nightmares came, who didn't get frustrated when Lily couldn't find her words. Next on the stand was Dr. Marissa Chen, Lily's therapist. "Lily has made significant progress in our sessions, particularly with the assistance of her service dog, Max. He's been trained specifically to recognize signs of her anxiety and panic attacks before they escalate. Separating them would be detrimental to her recovery. And is it your professional opinion that Lily should remain with her grandmother? Asked Helen's lawyer, Ms. Rodriguez. My professional opinion is that stability and emotional security are paramount for Lily right now. Major changes, new home, new school, new support system could trigger regression. Uncle Thomas took the stand next, his designer suit and confident demeanor a stark contrast to Helen's modest appearance. I loved my brother, he said, his voice catching slightly. When I look at Lily, I see him. I want to give her everything he would have wanted for her, the best education, opportunities, a future without limitations. My wife and I have already researched the top schools in Chicago, and we've been approved to adopt. We can provide Lily with advantages that, frankly, Helen cannot. And what about Max? Ms. Rodriguez asked during cross-examination. Your wife is allergic to dogs, correct? Thomas cleared his throat. We found an excellent training facility that specializes in therapy animals. Max would be well cared for, and Lily could visit. Additionally, we're prepared to continue Lily's therapy with a highly recommended child psychologist in Chicago. Lily's hands tightened around Max's harness. Visit? Max wasn't some pet at a kennel. He was her protector, her friend, the one who lay across her legs when the weight of her body felt like nothing and she feared she might float away into darkness. He was the one who nudged her awake before the nightmares took full hold, who positioned himself between her and strangers when her anxiety peaked. The social worker, Ms. Patel, was the last to testify. She'd visited both homes, interviewed all parties, and reviewed Lily's medical and psychological evaluations. Both Mr. and Mrs. Riley and Mrs. Morgan are qualified to provide care for Lily, she stated diplomatically. Both homes are safe and appropriate. This is not a case of choosing between a good and bad option, but rather determining what arrangement best serves Lily's specific needs at this critical juncture in her development. Judge Winters leaned forward. And what is your recommendation, Ms. Patel? The social worker hesitated. While Mr. and Mrs. Riley can offer material advantages, there is undeniable value in the emotional continuity Mrs. Morgan provides. However, long-term considerations regarding Mrs. Morgan's age and financial situation cannot be dismissed. She paused. In cases like these, there is rarely a perfect solution. Throughout all of this, Lily hadn't made a sound. She sat, small and still, observing everything with wide, solemn eyes. The adults had been talking about her, around her, for her, but no one had asked her what she wanted. In her lap, she clutched a small notebook, filled with drawings and the words she couldn't speak aloud. Judge Winters noticed. Before we continue, I'd like to speak with Lily privately in my chambers. Your Honor, Mr. Peterson objected, given the child's condition, I'm not sure how productive that would be. Judge Winters fixed him with a stern look. Mr. Peterson, I've been a family court judge for 3 decades. I've learned that children have ways of communicating their wishes beyond words. I'd like to speak with Lily, along with her therapist and service dog, of course. In the judge's chambers, Lily sat on a large leather chair, her feet barely reaching the edge. Max positioned himself beside her, alert and protective. Lily, Judge Winters said gently, kneeling to meet the child's eyes, I know today must be very confusing and scary for you. Everyone in that courtroom wants what's best for you, but I'd like to know what you want. You can write it down if you'd like. Dr. Chen handed Lily her communication notebook and a pencil. Slowly, Lily wrote, I want to stay with Grandma and Max. Judge Winters nodded. I see. And can you tell me why? Lily hesitated, then carefully printed, Grandma knows me. Uncle Thomas doesn't. Your uncle says he can give you many things that your grandmother can't. Does that matter to you? Lily shook her head vigorously, then wrote, Grandma gives me what I need. And what do you need, Lily? The girl stared at the page for a long time before writing just one word, home. Judge Winters smiled softly. Thank you for telling me that, Lily. You're a very brave girl. As they returned to the courtroom, no one noticed the small, determined look that had settled on Lily's face, nor the way her hand lingered on Max's ear, as if giving him a silent instruction. Back in the courtroom, closing arguments were underway. Mr. Peterson emphasized the Rileys' financial stability and the opportunities they could provide. "Your Honor, while emotion might pull us toward maintaining the status quo, we must think pragmatically about Lily's future. In 10 years, Mrs. Morgan will be approaching 80. Who will care for Lily then? The Rileys are offering a permanent solution, not a temporary one." Ms. Rodriguez countered with passion, "Your Honor, Lily has experienced devastating loss. Her world was shattered 6 months ago. The only constants remaining are her grandmother and her service dog, both of whom have been instrumental in whatever healing she's managed to achieve. To remove her from this support system would prioritize material wealth over emotional well-being." Judge Winters listened intently, her face betraying nothing of her thoughts. When both attorneys had finished, she addressed the courtroom. "I've heard compelling arguments from both sides today. This is not an easy decision. On one hand, we have a loving grandmother who has been a constant in Lily's life. On the other, we have an uncle and aunt who can offer financial security and opportunities. Both options have merit." She paused, looking directly at Lily. "However, I must consider what will truly serve Lily's best interests, not just materially but emotionally and psychologically." Uncle Thomas smiled confidently, while Grandma Helen clutched her handkerchief, knuckles white with tension. "Before I make my decision," Judge Winters continued, "I want to address one more factor that troubles me. The service dog, Max, has been described as essential to Lily's treatment plan. Yet the proposed arrangement would separate them, with only occasional visits. I'd like to better understand the nature of their bond and the potential impact of this separation." This was the moment Lily had been waiting for. With deliberate movements, she opened her notebook and tore out a page she had prepared earlier. She tugged gently on her grandmother's sleeve and handed her the note. Helen read it, her eyes widening slightly before she leaned over to whisper to Ms. Rodriguez, who promptly stood. "Your Honor, Lily has requested an opportunity to demonstrate something relevant to these proceedings. With the court's permission?" Judge Winters looked surprised but nodded. "Proceed." All eyes turned to Lily as she stood, Max attentive at her side. For a moment, she simply stood there, her small figure somehow commanding the attention of the entire courtroom. Then, with deliberate movements, she raised her right hand to her left shoulder and tapped twice, a gesture so subtle it would have been missed if not for the absolute silence that had fallen. Max immediately shifted his posture, moving to stand directly in front of Lily, creating a barrier between her and the rest of the room. His demeanor changed from calm companion to alert protector in an instant. Lily made another gesture, touching her earlobe once, and Max immediately retrieved her backpack from beneath the table, gently placing it at her feet. A third signal, Lily softly patting her thigh, and Max pressed his body against her legs, applying deep pressure therapy that visibly calmed the slight trembling that had begun in her hands. The courtroom watched in stunned silence as Lily and Max performed the choreographed demonstration of over a dozen commands, each initiated by a nearly imperceptible signal from Lily. Some were practical, like retrieving specific items from her backpack or guiding her to the nearest exit. Others were clearly therapeutic, designed to interrupt anxiety or panic attacks before they escalated. For the finale, Lily made a gesture that looked like she was adjusting her hair. Max immediately retrieved a card from a special pocket on his vest and brought it to Judge Winters. On it was written, "I am experiencing severe anxiety and cannot speak. Please call my emergency contact." The demonstration complete, Lily returned to her seat, her face flushed with the effort of being the center of attention but her eyes clear with purpose. Judge Winters stared at the card in her hand, then at the girl and her dog. The profound complexity of their communication, developed in just 6 months, spoke volumes about Lily's intelligence, Max's training, and the critical nature of their partnership. "Your Honor," Dr. Chen spoke up, "what you've just witnessed is a comprehensive communication system that Lily and Max have developed together. These aren't standard service dog commands. They've created a unique language that allows Lily to communicate her needs even when she cannot speak. This is extraordinary progress for a child with selective mutism and PTSD. Thomas leaned forward, whispering urgently to his lawyer, who stood. Your Honor, while impressive, this demonstration only underscores our commitment to continuing Lily's therapy. We can arrange for similar training with a new service animal in Chicago. At this, something unexpected happened. Lily made a sound, not quite a word, but a distressed noise that drew everyone's attention. Max immediately responded, placing himself between Lily and her uncle, his posture protective but not aggressive. Helen spoke softly to her granddaughter, who nodded and quickly wrote something in her notebook. Helen read it and addressed the court. Lily wants you to know that it took 3 months of working with Max every day before he could recognize her panic attacks. He can now identify them before Lily herself is aware they're happening. This isn't training that can be transferred or replicated quickly. Judge Winters nodded thoughtfully. I understand. She turned to Thomas. Mr. Riley, your desire to provide for your niece is commendable. But I must ask, have you ever witnessed one of Lily's panic attacks? Thomas shifted uncomfortably. No, Your Honor. But we're prepared to learn whatever is necessary to support her. Mrs. Morgan, how frequently do these episodes occur? Helen's voice was steady but heavy with the weight of shared suffering. They were happening multiple times daily after the accident. Now, with Max's intervention, they're down to a few times a week. Without him recognizing the early signs, they escalate to the point where Lily can't breathe and sometimes loses consciousness. A heavy silence fell over the courtroom. The clinical descriptions in the psychological reports hadn't captured the reality of Lily's condition or the life-saving nature of her bond with Max. Judge Winters turned her attention back to Lily, who sat stroking Max's fur, her eyes downcast but her posture resolute. Lily, the judge said gently, the demonstration you just showed us was remarkable. Did you plan this for today? Lily nodded, then wrote something and showed it to her grandmother. She says she wanted to show everyone that Max isn't just a pet, Helen translated. He's her voice when she can't find words. Judge Winters smiled softly. I think you've made that abundantly clear. She turned to address the courtroom at large. I'm going to take a brief recess to consider all that I've seen and heard today. Court will resume in 30 minutes. As Judge Winters exited to her chambers, the courtroom buzzed with whispered conversations. Thomas and his wife huddled with their lawyer, their expressions concerned. Helen knelt beside Lily, whispering words of praise and encouragement that in the privacy of her chambers. Judge Winters removed her glasses and rubbed her eyes. 30 years on the bench, and she was still being taught new lessons. The bond between the girl and her dog wasn't simply supportive, it was a sophisticated communication system, a therapeutic tool, and possibly the difference between Lily recovering from her trauma or being permanently defined by it. She thought about what removing Max would mean, not just the loss of a pet, but the dismantling of a carefully constructed scaffolding that was allowing a traumatized child to function in the world. She thought about Helen Morgan's modest home filled with memories and stability, versus the Rileys' wealthy but unfamiliar household. When Judge Winters returned to the courtroom, her decision was clear in her mind, though her face remained impassive. She took her seat, surveyed the anxious faces before her, and began to speak. After careful consideration of all testimony and evidence presented today, including the remarkable demonstration we witnessed, I am prepared to render my decision regarding the custody of Lily Morgan. The courtroom was utterly silent, the tension palpable. Lily leaned against her grandmother, one hand buried in Max's fur. Family court cases are rarely black and white. They require us to weigh competing interests and consider factors beyond material provisions. In this case, we have 2 loving homes being offered to a child who has experienced significant trauma. Judge Winters directed her gaze at Thomas and his wife. Mr. and Mrs. Riley, your desire to provide opportunities for your niece is admirable. Your financial stability and commitment to her future education demonstrate genuine concern for her welfare. Thomas nodded, a cautious hope in his eyes. However, the judge continued, turning toward Helen, Mrs. Morgan has been a constant presence throughout Lily's life. The stability she provides, especially during this period of recovery, cannot be undervalued. She paused, looking directly at Lily. Most compelling, however, is what I witnessed today. The bond between Lily and her service animal is not merely emotional but functional and therapeutic. It is, in essence, a medical intervention that has allowed her to make significant progress in her recovery. Judge Winters straightened her papers, her decision crystallizing into words. It is the finding of this court that Lily Morgan's best interests will be served by remaining in the primary custody of her grandmother, Helen Morgan. Helen gasped softly, tears immediately filling her eyes. Beside her, Lily remained still, but her grip on Max's fur loosened slightly. Furthermore, the judge continued, given the essential nature of the service animal to Lily's well-being and recovery, the court orders that Lily and Max must remain together. Any future custody arrangements must accommodate this requirement. Thomas's face fell, disappointment evident. His wife reached for his hand, squeezing it in silent support. Judge Winters wasn't finished. However, I believe Lily would benefit from maintaining a relationship with her aunt and uncle. Therefore, I am granting the Rileys visitation rights, to be arranged at times that do not disrupt Lily's therapy schedule, schooling, or routine. Additionally, recognizing Mrs. Morgan's financial limitations, I am ordering the establishment of a trust fund for Lily's education, to be jointly funded by the Rileys and from the insurance settlement from her parents' accident. She leaned forward, addressing both parties directly. This ruling is not about winners and losers. It is about creating the best possible environment for a child who has already lost too much. I expect all parties to work together in Lily's best interest. With a final look at the little girl who had changed the course of what seemed like a straightforward hearing, Judge Winters added, Lily showed us today that sometimes, the most profound communications don't require words. She demonstrated incredible resourcefulness and determination in making sure her needs were understood. That kind of resilience deserves to be nurtured in an environment where she already feels safe and understood. The judge struck her gavel. Court is adjourned. The formality of the courtroom dissolved as Helen embraced Lily, tears streaming down her face. We're going home, sweetheart. We're all going home together. For the first time in months, Lily smiled, a small, hesitant curve of her lips, but unmistakably a smile. Max wagged his tail, sensing the shift in emotion. Thomas approached them, his initial disappointment giving way to acceptance. Helen, he said softly, I want you to know that we'll honor the judge's decision. We still want to be part of Lily's life, if you'll let us. Helen nodded, extending a hand to her former adversary. Lily needs all the family she can get. We'll make it work. As they prepared to leave the courtroom, Judge Winters approached Lily. Kneeling down to her level, she said, Young lady, I've been a judge for a very long time, and I've never seen anything quite like what you showed us today. You and Max make quite a team. Lily ducked her head shyly, but then did something unexpected. She reached into her backpack and pulled out a folded piece of paper, offering it to the judge. It was a drawing, simple but heartfelt, of a courtroom where a small girl and a dog stood before a smiling judge. Written at the bottom in careful letters were the words, Thank you for listening. Judge Winters accepted the drawing with a warm smile. You're very welcome, Lily. And thank you for teaching all of us something important today. As Lily left the courthouse, walking between her grandmother and uncle with Max faithfully at her side, the sun broke through the clouds that had hung over the city all day. The path ahead wouldn't be easy. There would still be nightmares, therapy sessions, and the long process of grief and healing. But for the first time since the accident, the future held more light than shadow. 6 months later, Lily started 3rd grade at her local elementary school. On the first day, as Helen dropped her off, Lily paused at the school entrance, a moment of anxiety washing over her. But Max was there, pressing against her leg in reassurance. She gave him the signal. They had practiced a light touch to her wrist, and he responded by retrieving a small stone from the special pocket on his vest. It was a worry stone, smooth and cool in her palm, grounding her in the present moment. With that small comfort in her hand and her faithful companion at her side, Lily took a deep breath and stepped forward into the school. And as she did, she found her voice just a whisper at first, but her own voice nonetheless, to say hello to the classmate who greeted her. From that small beginning, words would gradually return, haltingly at first, then with growing confidence. The road to recovery wasn't linear, but with each step, Lily Morgan reclaimed a piece of herself that the accident had threatened to take away forever. And it had all turned on a moment in a courtroom, when a little girl gave a secret signal to her dog, and a wise judge recognized that sometimes, the most profound connections need no words at all. Inspirational music swells, life can change in an instant, taking away what we hold most dear. But as Lily's story shows us, healing is possible when we have the right support. Sometimes, our strength comes not from speaking loudly, but from finding new ways to be heard. If you were moved by Lily and Max's journey, please like this video and subscribe to our channel for more stories that illuminate the resilience of the human spirit. Share your thoughts in the comments below, and let us know about the special bonds in your life that have helped you through difficult times.